is here live in our church in Lebanon, and hopefully those of you who are live on our live stream. I know we had a little bit of issues with the scheduled one, but hopefully you got over into the AmiciMusic live stream where we are now. We want to thank you who are coming in to help support the folks in Asheville, North Carolina. Many of you know that I lived in Asheville, and I have a music series there called AmiciMusic. I was supposed to go there next week for concerts, but they are in the middle of a terrible cleanup. Most of the people there still have no water, and some have no power, and many have no internet. So this is a program that we are, all of the proceeds from this concert will go down to two different organizations down there. One called Arts Asheville, which has supported all of the artists and musicians and writers for many years in Asheville. And right now they're just currently trying to help those who lost either their home or unfortunately the River Arts District, where many people had all of their artwork was largely washed away in the flood, so their livelihood is gone. So they are very helpful with that, and so you can donate to the Arts Asheville. There is a link on the YouTube video to do that. If you can't figure out how to use the link, you can find their addresses, I think, online. If you can't do either of those, you can send a check and to AmiciMusic, and I will send everything down to them. The address for AmiciMusic, if you need that, 509 Maupas Avenue, M-A-U-P-A-S, in Savannah, Georgia, 30401. But hopefully you can find a way to just get this money directly into those who, either the Arts Asheville or the other organization is the White Horse Black Mountain, an incredible place to play music that I performed, one of the first places that AmiciMusic performed, but they are just a beautiful community center, and right now they have stopped all music and are just a gathering place for those who need grief help and healing and supplies. They have free supplies, including, I think, free beer. It's just a great organization, but they need to be able to pay their staff and help others. So you can also donate directly to White Horse, and their link is up there. And again, anybody in live, you can go and check out all of that as well. But we are doing this for everybody there in Asheville. I'm thinking of all of my friends there, and we hope that you're able to see this incredible show, and hopefully we can do more of this. I know we have many months of cleanup to do there. So this is going to be a very fun program that's called a fabulous four-hand frolic. I love alliteration, as you know, and we have a great pianist working with me as we take over the choreography of the piano. Many of you know Elizabeth Borowsky, who is a Baltimore legend. Their whole family, many of you have met Emmanuel and Francis, violin and cello, and her mother, Cecilia Barczyk, also a fantastic cellist. They have been performing together since they were very young kids in Baltimore and then all around the world. 10 years ago, Elizabeth moved up into this area and has done remarkable work as a pedagogue and just in the whole musical community to bring people together. So it's always wonderful to be able to perform with Elizabeth. She has all her life played piano trios with violin and cello, but really didn't have another pianist to play with. So it's been fun to work out the four-hand piano literature with her and do some great pieces, including at the very end today, a fantastic arrangement that some of you have probably heard of, Rhapsody in Blue, which is celebrating its 100th birthday this year. And it is just an amazing piece every time I play it, and I've played it many times. But before we get to Rhapsody in Blue, we're going to begin with, on the first half, two pieces from France. First piece by Georges Bizet, and then one by Gabriel Faure. We'll take about a 10-minute break. There are two bathrooms in the back for those who are live. You guys do your own bathrooms. We will come back for the second half. We'll do a work by Amy Beach, who is a wonderful woman composer from New Hampshire, actually, who's finally getting her due after too many years being neglected. And we will finish with that wonderful Rhapsody in Blue. So we begin with Georges Bizet, whose actual full name was Alexander Caesar Leopold Georges Bizet. If you got that many names, you're going to be famous, I think. And he was an amazing prodigy, by most accounts, one of the great pianists as a 12 or 13-year-old, went to the Paris Conservatory, started composing there, and quickly was seen as one of the best composers. And he won the Prix de Rome, which is sort of the key prize if you're a composer. If you win that, you get to spend 3 years in Rome at the Medici place down there amongst all sorts of other artists, and you get to really create. So there was a lot of promise for Bizet. But when he came back to write music in France in around 1860, he really struggled to get critics to like his music. He wrote a couple operas, a symphony, and they just thought it didn't have any good melodies. It was too pedantic and intellectual, which is hard to believe because he writes some of the great melodies, but he really struggled. This is one of the first pieces that people sort of said, hey, that's a pretty good work. And it comes out in 1872. It's called Les Arlésiennes, the girl from Arles, and it actually was originally incidental music for a play of that same name. And the play was kind of a dark play about, that took place in Arles in Provence, southern France, and it was kind of a love affair and a suicide and kind of miserable. And so the director of the theater, it was called the Theater Vaudeville, was a friend of Bizet, and he thought maybe a little music could lighten up the horror of the play. As he said, the play is a little too somber for my theater, but I think the music will be a powerful attraction, and it will soften somewhat the cruelty of the play. He was wrong about that. The play was a disaster. It closed after about 12 shows. But Bizet had written such good music for this play that his friend said, you've got to take that music and turn it into an orchestral suite so that we can keep hearing all the good tunes you wrote. And so he did, and he wrote what's known as the Arlésienne Suite Number 1. We're actually doing Suite Number 2. And that suite, made up of 4 different parts of what the music he'd written for the play, was a huge success. It was one of the first great successes Bizet had. It was so successful that they decided they wanted to make a second suite. The problem was, and I'll get to that, Bizet dies of a heart attack at the age of 36 in 1875, a couple of years after this, and they decide they want to do the second suite in 1879. So they ended up asking his friend Giraud to put together 4 other pieces if they could, because it was so successful, and he did. And you'll hear in this these 4 pieces, a prelude, and then a little intermezzo, which has a kind of low brass sound. In the orchestral version, it sounds a bit like the Dies Irae. It sounds very foreboding in the beginning, but then this lovely melody, and it is a beautiful melody. The guy knew how to write a good tune. The third piece that's in this suite, the minuet, is actually not even from the Arlésienne suite. It was from an earlier Bizet opera, but the guy who put it together liked the piece so much, he just tossed it in there as part of the suite. And then the last one you might recognize, it's the most famous, the Farandole, and it's just a really exciting piece with all sorts of tambourines in the orchestral version. This is in the four-hand version, you can hear it in the bass. But what's interesting about this one, for the show, Bizet had actually gone to a Provençal folk book and looked up tunes, and he takes 2 of those tunes. One is called The March of the Kings, which is a Provençal Christmas carol celebrating the Epiphany and the 3 kings. You'll hear that in the beginning of the 4th one. Bum, 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 ba, bum, ba, bum, ba, bum. And then that segues into another tune known as the Dance of the Frisky Horses, which you will hear some frisky horsing going around in that one, and it really comes to a wonderful conclusion. Now, as I mentioned, Bizet does die in 1875. But not before he gets around to writing a piece that you probably know, his opera Carmen. And you might say, well, that's the greatest piece ever, so that was good. And Bizet thought the same thing. He actually told a friend, all the critics make out that I am obscure, complicated, tedious, more fettered by technical skill than lit by inspiration. Well, this time around, I have written a work that is full of clarity and vivacity, color and melody. And of course it is, if you know Carmen. That's not what the critics thought. Believe it or not, they did not like Carmen when it first came out. Now, a lot of it had to do with what was going on stage. There were women smoking cigarettes. Carmen is not the usual damsel in distress in opera. She's a pretty powerful woman, which kind of shocked audiences. But there were critics who also complained about the music. One complained about a lack of melody. Another says, it's dull and obscure. The ear just grows weary waiting for the cadence that never comes. And sadly, Bizet wrote to that same friend, I foresee a definite and hopeless flop. And on the 30th production of that, and we'd only have a few more, he died of a heart attack. So when he dies, he thinks Carmen is a flop, which is a terrible thing. It then went on to become, I think, the most performed opera of all time. I love to read one review, one criticism. This was written by a librettist, Jean Dupin, to his fellow librettist, Mailhac, who wrote the libretto for Carmen, and he said the following. I will not mince words. Your Carmen is a flop, a disaster. It will never play more than 20 times. The music just goes on and on and on. It never stops. There's not even time to applaud. That's not music. And your play? That's not a play. A man meets a woman. He finds her pretty. That's the first act. He loves her. She loves him. That's the second act. She doesn't love him anymore. That's the third act. He kills her. That's the fourth. You call that a play? It's a crime, do you hear me? A crime. So there were a lot of people who hated Carmen, and it's terrible to think of Bizet listening to all that, thinking he had written a beautiful, great show, and did not. There were people, of course, who loved it. Tchaikovsky thought it was great. He said one about it. Carmen is a masterpiece in every sense of the word. It's one of those rare creations which expresses the efforts of a whole musical epic. And my final quote is one that Bizet said, and you can understand why he said it. He said, "What a beautiful art music is, but what an utterly wretched profession." This is a man who really struggled, but I think you'll love this music. This is the second suite from the Arlesians. Please welcome Elizabeth Borowsky.